Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us on Hilaal TV, DSTV channel 347. Later on, we will be speaking to Ghulam Pelham, Standard Bank's chief economist, with regards to the economic outlook of the country and, of course, globally. But let's start with this now. South Africa's mining sector stands at a critical juncture, with industry leaders warning that the future of one of the country's most historic economic engines depends on policy clarity, investor confidence, and structural reforms. According to the Minerals Council South Africa, mining once built this nation, and with the right conditions, could be key to broad-based economic growth again. Now, despite encouraging signs such as improved credit ratings and easing inflation, investor remains cautious as the industry grapples with lingering energy, logistics, and regulatory challenges that have weighed on production and confidence. Joining me now to take this conversation forward, I'd like to welcome Mzila Mthenjane, who is the CEO of the Minerals Council South Africa. Mzila, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for your invitation.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Mzila, I guess from a continental perspective, just to start the conversation is South Africa still on the front foot in terms of the industry as a whole?
I believe South Africa is. I think given its history of mining, the depth of skills and capability, and I think where mining continues to be in the country, it certainly is in the front foot. Obviously, with the increasing demand for minerals and this new age of critical minerals, many other countries have come onto the landscape and are competing as well for investment capital. But South Africa has a huge advantage given its history, and I think the breadth of minerals that we mine, and I think the sophisticated level of our capital markets to be able to invest. So it still holds a very good position, and one of our key roles within the minerals industry is to make sure that we maintain that, and then more importantly, we extend that into the future.
Mzila, I guess now we've got the Mining Indaba starting on Monday, and I guess one of the key aspects is to supposedly convince investors, these mining conglomerates that, look, South Africa still remains a sort of hub for mining, an attraction for mining, especially within the African continent. And I guess that's going to be the same message, isn't it, come next week, Monday?
No, absolutely. In fact, I'm already attending a conference this week on steel and ferroalloys, and there will be another conference which started today and extends to tomorrow on coal. And maybe there's two things that I can mention in terms of investor confidence in South Africa's mining industry. And the first one is around the legislative context. I think quite often we've focused on the negative aspects of our policy environment, but there's some real positives that we really need to continue to focus on relative to our peers in the rest of the continent. And that is, I think, quite an advanced legislative process and legislative landscape. Firstly, in terms of South Africa's constitution, where there are dispute resolution mechanisms, and I think a pretty clear recourse to the law in the event of something going wrong. The second thing is that we've got a minerals and fiscal policy landscape that actually lays the ground for everyone to operate without favor or preference to anyone else. And what we've seen in other countries is that you've got what can be very opaque bilateral agreements between government and a particular investor, and you don't know if that is the same for every investment. It might not be the same in every other country. So that's the first thing. And when it comes to what we would like to see as a significant change to policy, it's then certainty of policy and predictability, which then allows for long-term planning. Mining, at the very least, is a 20 to 30-year game, and if you've got a large deposit, that can extend up to 100 years in some instances. So the ability to plan within a stable policy environment with security of tenure over 30 years and repeated over 30, that is the most critical aspect of policy that we are promoting. The
Mzila,
second thing,
yeah, no, apologies,
sorry, carry
continue.
on.
Yeah. No, apologies, please continue with the second part.
No, and then the second thing that I want to emphasize in terms of South Africa is that we've got the mineral endowment across a number of different commodities. And so the ability to take advantage of that means that specific policy, and in our case, that promotes exploration is absolutely important. Mining begins with exploration. And so with the mineral endowment, we've been saying that we got to make sure that investors who want to prospect for any mineral should not be burdened with legislation that requires additional social, environmental, and other requirements for compliance for these investors. It's not to say that there shouldn't be any law, but it's just to say for any venture, and in this case, whether it's mining or any other business, we've got to make it easy to start a business and to be successful.
Mzila, there's something interesting you mentioned with regards to policy. Now, I'm going to toss your mind back. It's a conversation I had with Minister Gwede Mantashe, and I'd asked him at the time when the BHP Bulletin deal was kind of in limbo at the moment. A lot has changed with regards to that since then. This was, of course, July 2024, and I'd ask him, to what extent are you willing to change policy to accommodate mining conglomerates having a supposed wrestling of power? And he was adamant that the South African government will not risk that at any time possible. In terms of policy, Mzila, does the South African government need to sort of take the shackles off? Or are they right in saying that, look, we're not going to have private entities, conglomerates tell us or make determinations to us in terms of how we need to manage our resources?
I don't think it's really telling government how to manage resources. I think the law should provide for market principles to prevail. And, in case of mergers and acquisitions, for those to take place, within the confines of the law without interference or intervention from government. I don't think in any way there's an attempt to try and dictate. Because mergers and acquisitions by themselves create significant amount of value for the country, and at times in ways that may not be visible to the public in terms of some of the investments that take place, not only in actual mining, but in many other areas that actually support the mining. It could be in skills of people, it could be investment in community infrastructure. And so there needs to be a place provided for both large companies in mining, as well as the rest of and different size of companies below that. The issue of ministerial discretion, which I think is what you may be referring to,
sure,
is one we have raised a concern about, where in the manner in which it was presented in the MRD bill, which is currently under review, was really controlling in an unnecessary way the manner in which the stock market would operate in as far as corporate transactions. And I'd like to believe that our suggestions that this is not something that is necessary to be made law will be taken on board, and we are waiting to see what the revised bill would look like.
Mzila, commodity prices have gone high, but especially when it comes to gold. I think in my lifetime, I haven't seen gold go on to 5,000 US dollars per ounce. How much can South Africa look at that and say, let's leverage from that? Because South Africa still remains quite a hub for gold mining, and that is important, isn't it? So where are we in terms of saying, we've got this commodity that's quite high, let's try and make something happen, especially for economic growth within the country?
Yeah. No, I mean, when it comes to gold for me, I started my mining career in the gold industry, and just a little bit of history. We peaked in terms of gold mining in South Africa at 1,000 tons in 1970. And I think gold at the time was going upwards towards the level of $800 to $1,000 per ounce. And even then that was high. And South Africa was able to reap significant benefits in terms of the kind of investments it made into the country at a time when it was under sanctions. You know, we are a country that is advanced from an industrialization perspective because of that history of gold mining. Given where we are today, we producing gold, you know, at about 100 tons, you know, 10% of our peak. But at current prices, that is still quite significant, and it's going to have a huge impact on the fiscus and the South African balance sheet. And so you're absolutely correct that we should be leveraging, you know, the benefits of this gold price. And in fact, I should also mention not just the gold price, but also look at what's happened to platinum and palladium prices, as well as chrome. And so the diversity of minerals that we're having, and when prices react in this way to market dynamics in terms of supply and demand, South Africa sits in a very good position to be able to harvest that. And what then remains important is that those tax revenues must be put in the right places, because we are in great need of development. And this brings me to a topic that I love talking about in terms of just the whole concept of mining as a catalyst for economic development for the country. And we really, it's a window of opportunity that we cannot afford to waste.
Mzila, unfortunately, we have run out of time. Hopefully, we can speak to you on much more topics with regards to mining and minerals. Absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Faraz.
That's Mzila Mthenjane, the CEO of the Minerals Council South Africa. Up next, the foot and mouth disease seems to be continuing within the country. Of course, a vaccination rollout is happening. But what will that mean in terms of the price of red meat, but also in terms of the sort of economical aspects with regards to the country? I'm going to be speaking to the Southern African Agricultural Initiative's Francois Rousseau after the break. Do stay tuned.